When I look at organizations that make really good decisions, they appreciate that conflict is how organizations think. So the issue is there enough conflict around the right things? And are the right people in the room having that argument? There's a huge kind of temptation to go along with the crowd for a quiet life, for quicker decision making. There's a huge temptation to think, well, other people must know something I don't know. If this decision doesn't make sense to me, well, I guess it makes sense to everybody else. I think we need to see higher standards of questioning those assumptions, and higher standards really in terms of thinking, have we surfaced the assumptions and challenged them? We're working in a business environment where a lot changes very quickly, and what may have been true earlier in our careers may not be true now. What may have been true last year may not be true now. Human beings are capable of outstanding decision making, but they have to think about how those decisions are made, with whom they're made, and ensure that there's ample time to think about them, reflect on them, and go back and keep refining them. All of the research into great teams shows that it requires great contributions from every member. That boards that fail have dominant members and they have silent passengers. People have questions and concerns, but they don't voice them. They don't voice them sometimes because they're afraid, sometimes because they think there's no point, sometimes because they're very uncomfortable with the levels of conflict that they might provoke. And in that case, you may have a very diverse board, but you're not getting the benefit of it. Arguments are a way of exploring, of testing that decision-making is robust enough, and that it isn't a personal attack on somebody's competence or somebody's eligibility. It's really a way of testing the assumptions and decisions that the board's making. But I think it is every board member's responsibility to sit in a meeting and consider decisions with the question, what would make this better? What makes it dangerous? What makes it safe? We're willfully blind in part because we're very attracted to people like ourselves. We read newspapers that we agree with. We watch television channels that we agree with. We generally live in neighborhoods populated by people like ourselves. And all of that's very comfortable and to some degree very efficient. But what it means is that we don't encounter disconfirmation. We don't see the other side of the story. We don't live in the other side of the story, and we don't see the other news. And that means that we have a very, very partial understanding of the environment in which we live. So one of the reasons that diversity has become so important is not only social justice, it's this issue that if you want to see the full picture, you need to have people around the board table who inhabit these different kind of mindsets. And in an age of complexity, the failure to take account of multiple perspectives is really dangerous. We understand that complex systems are impossible to see in a kind of single view. So you need those multiple views if you're going to understand the world you're living in, whether that's in government, whether it's in education, whether it's in business, or even, frankly, whether it's in your personal life. When organizations make terrible mistakes or have terrible accidents, it's almost never because of things that weren't known. It's because of things that people did know or could have known or should have known, which they somehow chose to ignore. Denial and willful blindness are very closely related. We have what's psychologists call the status quo trap. We're more comfortable with where we are than where we might go. So climate change is really the epitome of willful blindness on a global scale because it draws in all the factors that create and drive willful blindness. It means if we're surrounded by other people who don't care on the whole, we won't change our behaviors. It means that if you have a kind of ideology that says you want to go slowly and not make radical change, then you're not going to respond to climate change. If you have an ideology that thinks you have to have 100% solid data before you make a decision, then that becomes an excuse for passivity. It's very driven by conformity. I just want to do what everybody else is doing, and if everybody else is doing nothing, I'll do nothing. Mostly, I think it's driven by bystander behavior, which is where we can see that something needs to be done. So we'll say something needs to be done. Somebody should do something, but it's not me. The fossil fuel industry has done a fantastic job completely imitating what tobacco companies did. Said all you need to sell is doubt. So they've sold doubt magnificently. But turn the question the other way around. If you work on the basis of all the data that says climate change is real, and it were to turn out that actually it isn't as big a threat as people thought, what have you done? You've built whole new industries that are more efficient and cheaper than fossil fuels. You've reduced the very tangible problem of pollution, and you've reduced geopolitical risk to do with oil and gas imports. All of that's positive. So why would you not do the positive stuff in order to keep doing this stuff, which is clearly, visibly, politically, and personally risky? When we know something with so much clarity, with so much supporting evidence, how can any legitimate, responsible organization or government do nothing? And so this becomes a crisis of legitimacy for democracies too. If the house is on fire and nobody's doing anything about it, then they clearly shouldn't be in charge. And I think that has made a lot of business leaders think very carefully about what is their legacy going to be. Are they going to be the last CEO who didn't pay attention, or the first one who did?